Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of Fake Accents Unite. I'm joined, as always, by the Britisher. Good evening, sir.
Good evening. How are we doing?
Oh, not too bad, I don't think. The week is past, as it's wont to do. The week that was is out and about, and things appear to be sunny and not too windy around these parts. How's things on your end?
Well, I mean, at my end, I am, of course, now really suspicious about your Teutonic heritage.
My Teutonic heritage? What?
Oh, yes. You had a very Germanic way of clearing your voice just before we came on air.
I mean, you would know about the Germans, Britisher, having been raised on the continent.
There are not too many who clear their voices to the tune of Beethoven. I mean, you literally did that. So yes, what can I say? It's all coming to the fore. You're out of the Germanic closet.
I don't know what it is that you see in me, Britisher. You just seem to want to project something. Next, you'll be telling me that my birthday is somewhere around April 20th. And
no, first in your case, definitely first.
Definitely the first of April. Oh, so Scowen says, with your apparently incorrigible nature of your lateness, one has to question if you also drive across red lights because you still perceive them to be green and vice versa. Also, you're late. Thank you, Scowen. Always a pleasure.
Now, this wasn't the typical Scowen message, wasn't it? Because it definitely was missing a certain level of precision. We were not told how many seconds we were late.
No. He timed it precisely so that.
I mean, you see, I would dispute that we were being late at all. I mean, he can't even come up with a figure. That's what I say.
I mean, who even remembers that long ago when we started this podcast, whether or not we were late or not? It sounds like hearsay to me. It's ridiculous.
Well, that's the Scandinavians for you. What can I say?
As those of you in chat will have noticed, the title of this edition is Fight Club Edition, not named because I am going around beating people up, or because the Britisher has a particular desire to ingest or create soap, but because I have watched for the first time Fight Club this week, and there was nothing else to name the stream, to be perfectly frank. So I thought that it would be a nice intro to this.
You thought you would use the title to brag about your actually having watched a film.
I'm not bragging about having watched the film, Britisher. Like, it's it's a very special. I like to share parts of my life. Think of this like a kind of extended self-stroking of my ego. That's all it is.
Yes. Yeah.
Apparently, I'm very, very loud now on stream. I'm not sure why, but I've turned myself down a little bit, so hopefully it's not too bad there. I'm wondering where my mind is after having watched it. Yes, it was great. Of all the things, I had not had the twist spoiled for me in all these years, so that was quite nice. Just a thoroughly entertaining film, something for which I know that Rubber Comedy, for those of you who may not know, he's a regular guest on other streams and has his own channel, is turning in his bed right now, basically going, Fight Club is a travesty, it's a boring film, it's not good, he didn't enjoy it at all. So, yes, I enjoyed the film, that's all I can say.
You enjoyed the film?
I did. Have you seen it, Britisher?
I've seen it, but A, I have seen it a long ago, and B, I wasn't paying that much attention because not that I, of course, would want to agree with Rubber here, because, then you would immediately decide to, press the ejector seat. But yes, I didn't find it overly interesting.
I mean, colour me surprised. I mean, there are lots of. What was it?
There was a distinct lack of grippedness on my part throughout that film.
Interesting. Whereas I found myself completely gripped, as you might say, what with the very existential themes going their way through, and there's certainly reasons to rewatch the thing, given that the various bits and pieces of hallucinogenic flimflammery, as you might call it, across.
Now that you know of the twist, you'd like to kind of see it, knowing that the twist is coming, that sort of thing.
Well, I knew that something was off whilst watching the film, and I was aware that a twist was coming, but I didn't know what the twist was. So it was interesting for me to see, but also, unreliable films with unreliable narrators are interesting in and of themselves because there's so much fun that can be had in the cinema sense, because you can mess around with stuff in the background and the dialogues, and you get hints and all sorts all the way through. So I'm looking forward to rewatching it.
You kind of want to watch it now with the perspective of knowing what the twist was, to see what the kind of Easter eggs, the kind of giveaways were that you missed because you didn't know what the twist was going to be.
Indeed, but there's also the fact that there's a scene in there about when in old film, in theatre projections, when they change over the reel, yes, and they have to do it seamlessly so that the audience doesn't know. That there's they apparently do things like that. One of the characters splices in split-second cuts in between the changing of the reels, explicit material and that sort of thing. And apparently there's cuts in the film which are little subliminal frame-perfect pauses where things change for a fraction of a second that you can pick up on if you're looking for them. So it sounds interesting to me. People in the chat appear to be split between people saying I should not be talking about Fight Club because that violates both the first and second rules of Fight Clubs. Muck006 says just because it isn't the Romans fighting, the Britisher isn't
of course
interested.
That is my only objection to the whole thing.
Yes. De Horteville says I am the Britishers' complete lack of moral fortitude. Strong. Yes.
So, to talk about Fight Club rather than my complete lack of moral fortitude, which is just beyond doubt, when it comes to this film, where would you place it in your rankings of the kind of dozen films that you have actually watched in your life?
1 to 12. I've watched more than 12 films. I watched some of them more than once. No, it's pretty up there, I would say, at the moment. I have to give it a re-watching and see whether or not it sticks around.
Have seen things like Lord of the Rings, have you not?
Sorry?
You have seen things like Lord of the Rings, have you not?
Yes, they're some of my favourite films.
Does it rank above that or below that, or is it so different that it basically avoids comparison?
I was going to say, you're really going to force me to, combine all the genres here and say, which particular one it's up there in its genre, which is, the kind of psychological thriller aspect of things. I'm trying to think what probably up there next to, American Psycho in terms of, just something which both surprises you and has a... for me, it was surprising. What I'd heard about Fight Club is it's a gritty film and people should watch it because, it's got a twist in it and Brad Pitt is topless. That's pretty much the extent of my knowledge of the film going in.
Yes, what was I saying about closet before? No, that was Germanic closet, wasn't it?
The Germanic closet. No. Oh, sure. Oh, right, no, this is what I've heard, Britisher. This is not the reason that I went to watch it.
How silly of me.
But so for instance, I had no idea that Edward Norton was in it, for instance, and that was a pleasant surprise.
But it's quite a sort of a cultish film, isn't it? It is a cult flick, really.
I was pretty sure it was successful at launch. I thought cult classics, as it were typically flops, which then gain an audience later on. That's why they're...
I don't know. I don't think you can sort of exclusively say they have to be a complete flop. I see Fight Club as having a sort of a bit of a sort of cultish following.
I mean, it's had a massive cultural impact, particularly on other media. I've become aware of of a couple of references, although none spring to mind typically now at the moment when I need them.
Yes.
In other media that I've watched, which are callbacks to either the cinematography of the scenes or the actual dialogue itself. But it's it's something that even people who haven't seen the film, I know that you don't talk about Fight Club. That's the line that's going in.
There are a lot of sort of lines that have kind of, how to say, sort of permeated the culture, that people know of certain phrases and whatever that come from it. But that's what I mean, that tends to be a bit of a cult following. So in the same way as, I shall make him an offer he can't refuse, comes from The Godfather, and you would say, well, The Godfather was a successful film in its day, but you would still say it has somewhat of a cult following with people knowing all the lines.
In the same way, I suppose, I don't know, you could say Hot Fuzz has a cult following.
Well, Star Wars surely has a cult following.
I mean, not anymore. Or maybe it had a following before and now it's a cult following because it's shrunk so significantly.
Well, of course, when it comes to my sort of saying, where does it rank? Obviously you can't immediately sort of say, oh, number 7. That it's impossible to kind of find an exact ranking, but it allows you to kind of come up with some sort of comparison. So in order to shock this gentleman in the audience, who was so convinced that I had a total fixation on the Romans, so you see something like Gladiator, and you see something like Lawrence of Arabia. And Lawrence of Arabia, as far as I recall, has no Romans in it, and yet it is a far, far superior film.
Yes, but that's because Russell Crowe ruined Gladiator.
Well, as far as I'm concerned, he was completely miscast in that. That's I know we will now have a storm of protest in the comments, but I stand by that. I think he looks about as un-Roman as one can possibly be. But yes, generally it's a deeply flawed film. It's got spectacular special effects. It's the best thing about it is the music. But yes, as a film, I'm sorry, it just doesn't stand up. Whereas, of course, the greatest film ever made, shall I now be controversial?
Go on.
The greatest film ever made is Moon over Parador.
It's what? Moon over Parador?
Yes, that film. Yes, that controversial film that is even more controversial than, what was that film you enjoyed so much? 120 Days of Sodom or whatever it was that AA managed to get you to watch?
Oh, he managed to get me to watch Salo. 120 Days of Sodom. Yeah. And that was truly it was an incredibly boring film, Britisher.
It was an experience.
You're watching
eaten for the next day or two.
No, not even that. I wasn't even repulsed. I was just bored. You're watching these Italian libertines basically enslave about 50 people and forcing them to do all these sorts of weird and bizarre things, including, for some bizarre reason, coprophilia, which for those of you who don't know is eating poo. But it's all intercut with these weird scenes where you've got like a lady who's sitting there in this kind of evening gown, discussing about the first time her master forced her to eat shit, basically, and it's so surreal. And there's there are the iconic scenes such as that in there, and there's one where they make them go around on their hands and knees as dogs for a week or something like that and bark. And they feed them bread rolls filled with nails. It's a bizarre but oddly boring film. I was like, I'm watching this because AA has asked me to watch it, but it's just it makes no sense. Do pray tell, what is Moon over Parador?
Well, of course, it's a funny little ditty. Almost it's just that tad bit. It's that tad greater than the other greatest film ever made that is called Let It Ride. I'm just wondering whether how long it will take the chat to work out what these films are.
Let It
It's
Ride.
Yes, both of them have Richard Dreyfuss in the lead role, and they are charming little films, and they are in fact very funny.
30% approval on according to the ratings that I'm seeing here. Although 93% of Google users like the film. Tipped off by his buddy, a loser cabbie parlays a $50 horse bet at the track.
That's Let It Ride, yes.
That's the extent of everything. Although I can see that the score was composed by Giorgio Moroder, which is I don't know whether or not that's a feather in his cap or vice versa, because he's a very good.
It's a good film. That's all I can say. You will enjoy watching the film. Let It Ride is a typical feel good movie. The entire aim of it is just basically to watch this guy have, for once in his life, this total loser have a great day. And Robbie Coltrane is in it. Star turn as the guy at the counter who takes the bets. Moon Over Parador is a kind of Prisoner of Zenda spin in which Richard Dreyfuss plays the American actor who is shooting a film on some tropical island in the Caribbean, and he just so happens to look a bit like the local dictator. Sort of the local dictator of the Banana Republic, if you know what I mean. He does quite a good impression of him as a kind of party trick.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, the local dictator dies.
Oh.
And the the powers that be on the island, the secret services and whatever, who are in league with the CIA and whatever, they have decided they don't really fancy relinquishing power while they've got a Marxist rebellion going on. So they would like the dictator to continue his reign, whether he wants to or not.
So he's recruited, is he?
So he becomes the new dictator, and yes, a less willing dictator there has never been. And then, of course, there are one or two twists. And again, it's a very, very funny film.
Now, Britisher, you know what I think of your opinion on pretty much everything.
On everything, really. Yeah.
Yes. That being that it's.
I think it's in line with one of the words you used in the description of what gets eaten in the film you were just talking about earlier. Yes.
Not complete and total, but pretty close. Pretty close. So I've put down.
You see, there is no danger of you're disagreeing with me, because I know full well that this was just a one-off that you actually watched a film. So the chances of you ever watching Moon Over Parador or Let It Ride are minuscule.
I will watch Moon Over Parador this week. I will come back to you next Monday, or rather, you'll come back to me. This is my show. This is my show. You're coming to me, and we will have a friendly discussion, and no one will turn up to watch it now that I've said that. But it's going to be. Hopefully, it'll be fun.
Has there been anybody, given that I'm not looking at the chat at the moment, has there been anybody who has actually commented on Moon Over Parador or Let It Ride, or is this a complete unknown to everybody out there?
Mergut says Parador is awesome, Dreyfuss awesome.
Well, there you go. See, a man of taste is all I can say.
Just jumping back a second, EC90 says Movie Bob, who's a YouTube critic, called Fight Club secret Nazi propaganda.
Oh, well, there you go. Now you know why you liked it.
It's the German influence there again, isn't it? That's what I enjoy. The Ubermensch.
I'll definitely have to watch that film again and look out for the goose stepping.
I don't really see it. I mean, it's a domestic terrorism. I don't know about Nazism. Dectran is asking me to read the Fight Club book. I was aware that it was based on a book, but I've not read it, so I shall. I will have to see if I can pick it up. We'll see. Admiral Belzadil says, Fight Club, is it? I preferred the sequel. There's a sequel to Fight Club?
I don't know. Perhaps they start an operation somewhere in the Mediterranean on an island and call it Club Fight.
Let's see. Fight Club 2 Electric Boogaloo. Fight Club... Oh, there's a comic book meta-sequel called Fight Club 2 The Tranquility Gambit. But yeah, that's as far as I know, but that's not a film as far as I'm aware. Although Google is telling me that Fight Club 2 has that there was a film called Fight Club Members Only, which is an Indian action film.
Well, there you go. Is it a bit like? Have you ever seen that sequence? That it was in a Bollywood movie, and it's a dance sequence, and it's clearly a rip-off of Michael Jackson's Thriller. Have you ever seen that?
No, I haven't. No.
It's hilarious. You definitely have to look that up once. If you look up Bollywood Michael Jackson Thriller, yes, I mean it's just so bad, but you can see what they were trying to do. But it's you just can't help yourself but laugh.
Nice. Apparently, Admiral Bells.
There you go. See, I'm looking at the chat now, and George says, "I hate to agree with the Brit, but both movies are very good." This is from a man who doesn't want to agree with me.
So he claims, but I mean, I wouldn't put it past you to create your own bot account to put in the chat.
This is a sock account of mine.
A sock account, yes. As we can see, his name George, so simple, so clearly a reference to George from Blackadder. You know,
how else could it be?
Being the puppet of Edmund, he clearly is the puppet of you, and therefore your sock account, Britisher. Very simple. Bill Whittaker says Moon over Parador is a rip-off of Heinlein's Double Star. I am not aware of Heinlein's Double Star.
I am not aware of Heinlein's Double Star either. If it is a rip-off, then good luck to them. It was a good rip-off. It really, it's an amusing film. It is a film that brings a smile to your face just thinking about it.
Oh, but do I really want to smile, Britisher? Is that really what we're in the middle of the coronavirus pandemic. I can't afford to smile. All my smiling privileges haven't been.
Who would want any relief from the abject misery of people dying?
We haven't got our smile licenses through yet.
Well,
that's what it is. Makuta Pterodax says Gladiator versus Fall of the Roman Empire. Opinion.
Both of them deeply flawed films.
Both of them deeply flawed films I have not watched.
But Fall of the Roman Empire more than likely nabs it a bit. But I'm being generous. But yes, both of them are overlong kind of, monstrosity epics. Both of them seem to be a bit all over the place. Now, obviously, Gladiator has higher production values, but that's just simply because it was when it was produced. If I would have to pick one of those two, I would pick Fall of the Roman Empire, but unwillingly, because yes, it so obviously ignores the two kind of benchmarks out there that are Spartacus and Ben-Hur.
Fair enough. George admits that he is indeed your sock account, Britisher, as you can see here.
Which, of course, would be the kind of thing I would do if I were running a sock account and, had run a sock account in order to pretend to be someone else, the first thing I would do is to admit that I am me.
Well, of course, in order to cast doubt on the idea that you would admit through your own sock account that you had a sock account. You knew that I would know that you knew what I was thinking, and I, can't have that. Yes. Don't you know how much natural Botox is released when you smile? It's got to be tons, says a fuzzy creature. I have no idea. Smile, you miserable bastard, says Silver. Sorry, the licenses haven't come through. It's illegal. I really don't want to get thrown in jail for that. Into prison. But no, on a similar theme of...
I think you're allowed to smile at home.
Yes,
you're not allowed to smile
within 4 feet of anyone else.
Within 4 feet of anyone outside. Yes, particularly not in a park.
Mm.
And given that you have to wear a mask most of the time, yes.
You're only allowed to smile through the mask.
Yes, you have to smile with your eyes. But as I say, in public, that then is only with members of your own household.
No. It's only at members of the NHS, I swear. The guidance changed today, did it not? You've got to smile alert. That's what it was, wasn't it? Smile alert,
yes,
protect...
Yes, you have to smile alert rather than smile at home. Yes.
Yes, smile alert, protect the NHS, save lives. That's the way it works. Silverman saying, "What's up, fellow house prisoners?" At the moment, we do all right. Are you pleased with the idea that you are now allowed, Britisher, to meet one friend outdoors per day, and you're allowed to do unlimited, or was it you're allowed to go out more than once for exercise?
What's a friend?
I am deeply hurt, Britisher. How dare you not consider Tailed Feature a friend? I mean, that's such a ridiculous...
that is that.
Speaking of coronavirus guidance, thanks for that segue there, Britisher. You've done so well for me here. The UK public is challenging Boris Johnson's vague messaging. We will go back to film, but I am just curious about what on earth is particularly vague about him changing 2 words and then saying that people should slowly filter back into work and laying out the plan for it. I'm no particular shill for the Conservatives, but his vagueness appears to be something which has been invented in this case.
You Tory shill.
Thanks.
Well, there are 2 things that I can see here. One is, as you say, it is indeed kind of, the political attack hamsters are out. The Nicola Sturgeons of this world, as in sort of, well, it's so vague, it's so totally confusing that we in Scotland will have to abide by completely separate rules.
Despite the fact
I
that
will be in charge of entirely in my domain.
Because that's going so well for them, given that they have a much lower population density and yet their infection rate is through the roof.
You've got that side of things. But on the other hand side, you have got, not in the slogan, as I say, the attack they're kind of launching of saying, this change of the slogan, you just stay alert, I don't know what it means. It's totally confusing. And you say, look, it's the English language. It shouldn't be that difficult to understand. The concept of alertness is not that novel.
No.
That side of things is just a put on. But the other one, where he kind of declares, well, we want you to go back to work, or to start thinking of going back to work, or, well, but, perhaps cycle and not use public transport. And you said that was a bit confusing, where you sort of felt, hang on a moment, what actually is the guidance here?
You can work and exercise as long as you would like. You can meet one person outside your household, providing you're observing social distancing. That's the change. That's it. Where is the vagary?
I still say that you can work if you like. Is a bit of a strange one.
Well, putting the personal response.
All the shops are to remain closed except essential ones, but you can work if you like. So what if you're a florist?
They're not. I don't think they've mandated now. I think the mandate is coming off, isn't it? That shops should
No,
remain.
I think the shops remaining closed at the moment is still there, from what I understand.
I mean, he says those who can't work from home should now speak to their employer about going back to work. Now, obviously, people have been saying things like, "Wow," in the nitty gritty details of it. What about those with children? Given that schools won't be reopening till June, for instance. But that just seems to be that means you can't go back to work then, doesn't it? Like, if you can't, if you're physically unable to go back to work because you can't pay for childcare, and also, you don't want to expose your kids to stuff before the schools reopen, then it's as simple as that. I imagine that the vagary is only particularly a problem for those employers who don't know how long they're going to be claiming wages out of the wages for their employees, I should say, out of the government purse, because they're I'm sure most of them don't actually want to be doing that, given that it's first of all only 80%, but secondly, they're not making any progress with the business. They can't not retaining customers for afterwards. You know what I mean?
I still, my overwhelming sentiment, having seen the presentation, because he had his graphs and everything, didn't he?
As always, as usual, yes.
Was that you kind of felt you needed to know a little more. You didn't feel completely informed having seen that. So I think there was a point to be made that it perhaps was a little on the vague side, but not necessarily for the reasons for which it's actually being criticised, which does, to me, indicate that the criticism is entirely politically motivated.
Oh, absolutely. You get people, aside from, might I say, Keir Starmer, who has said, we'd like more information. But, all the usual lefty shills, Owen Jones, Ash Sakar, and the like, all going on about how, this is unacceptable. Nicola Sturgeon was a shining beacon of an example to the world, clear, concise, and iron-willed, unlike Boris. I think that was basically verbatim what Owen Jones was saying. But
I mean, Owen Sarkar is always good for quite a few lines.
But yes, it's one of those things where I also wonder to a degree whether or not they're looking for things to say which are different. I noticed that where's this page here? There was basically a how do we control the virus? It's like everybody knows, everybody's been stuck inside. We don't need these 3 bullet points saying we can control the virus by keeping the rate of infection down. It's like, no shit. This is, everyone has a role to play in keeping the R down. Yes, this is not something new. You've managed to split that your original statement into 3 and put it up on a big board. I suppose it feels like it was more. The vagary arose more out of them trying to fill the time of the briefing, right? Because I feel like if they came in and they gave a 5-minute briefing and that was that,
they felt it had to have a bit more heft, so they needed to kind of stretch it. Yes.
They've got this slot on the BBC. They should fill it. Right?
I know what you mean, but I still think it was a little on the vague side. As in, we're loosening up, but we're not quite loosening. But you can, certain things like exercise and whatever were completely clear. I felt, there wasn't any problem there. But I thought when it was a matter of, people going back to work, that's where I think all round would more than likely have preferred a little more detail. What actually do you mean? So, yeah, I thought that side of things was justified, but the odd thing was I wasn't really getting any of that. I was getting criticism of the slogan, which I felt isn't really that much of a problem.
No, it's just like, oh, it's easy. I imagine the slogan will have been farmed out to people in 24 hours or so in advance. I know I was hearing murmurs about it yesterday. And so, it's the only thing that they can make a headline out of that they know they can print. People saying in chat, who is Keir Starmer? He's the leader of the Labour Party. In Britain,
he is the man who wants humour banned by law.
Yes, the man who protected Jimmy Savile when he was the head of the CPS, and amongst other skeletons in his cupboard. But he does seem to be doing a good job when it comes to things like PMQs and responses, the opposition's response. His comparison is Jeremy Corbyn, right, who basically framed the Labour Party as not a party but an activist group active within the bounds of the parliamentary system, so that it's like a very us and them. It's not government working to fix things, it's your government is failing and we the people hold you to account.
Yes.
Whereas Keir has brought it much more back onto a where it feels like the government must do more kind of front, and
he is not engrossed in class warfare.
Yes. No, he does much more strike me as the type who is a parliamentarian rather than an activist. And whether or not that's for better or worse, we shall see.
A Blairite parliamentarian who likes to see people prosecuted for jokes. Yes.
Mm.
I'm not letting go of that one.
I don't blame you, Brit, and we will obviously drag him through the through the Commons. As and when I don't think he's going to win a general election. If there's enough ammunition railed against him in the correct way. DRT is king, says. The greatest Roman history, we're back on the Romans, Britisher, was written by Anne Comnene on the Crusades in the Alexiad, which was a history of the greatest of Roman emperors, Alexos Komnenos.
Yes, the Comnene. Again, we are in Byzantine history, which seems to be DRT's king. It seems to be his little pet project. By the way, do you say Byzantine or do you say Byzantine? For me, it's Byzantine.
Typically, I say Byzantine.
Oh, well, there you go. We have another version, ladies and gentlemen. It's sometimes pronunciations of things can drive you insane. So recently, for example, there's one thing that's really niggling at me.
Why would you say niggling instead of nigeling? Sometimes the way you pronounce things really frustrates me.
Yeah, which is the word patriot. I think everybody agrees that's the way you pronounce it, patriot.
The Patriots.
Yeah, precisely. But it's a patriot, so the noun patriot. But now, is it patriotic or is it patriotic?
Patriotic.
Well, that's where I'm not sure. At times, it just sounds odd. And then, patriotism or patriotism?
Patriotism.
This was just it. Sometimes when you make videos of certain types, you basically have to just make an editorial decision, as in, okay, look, I need to agree on something, I'll just pronounce it all the same, patriot. But all the while, you're kind of thinking, hang on a moment, is this really the way you pronounce it? And since then, one or two other people have also kind of, you sure this is right? And my honest answer is, I'm not. I'm not sure.
All I can say, Britisher, is it's patriotism, patriotic, patriot, and any other pronunciation is an incorrect fornication of an accent.
Which source have you consulted to come?
I heard an American say patriot once, and never again. That's all.
No. Patriot, definitely not. But it's, yes, when it comes to patriotic, that's where you just go, hang on a moment. Yeah, given, sometimes it's kind of the rhythm
I mean,
of sentences or whatever. You
would you
suddenly bump up against a word and you just go, hang on a moment, this doesn't sound right.
look, British? Would you call it the patriarchy or the patriarchy?
Oh, well, I would just call it nonsense.
Yes, but if you had to say that cursed word,
Yeah, I would say patriarchy. Yes.
exactly. Therefore, it is patriotic.
This is just it. I'm not sure.
Britisher,
and there are
don't
one or
make
two other
me.
people who have expressed similar doubts.
I am
So
going to pour.
it's not that I'm sort of saying, oh, it's definitely this. It's precisely that. It's that I don't really know. But that sometimes kind of, you kind of feel it in your bones. Something doesn't quite feel right whilst you're doing something.
Look, Britisher, I'm going to
But anyway,
pour.
where were we? We were somewhere with the Komneni, weren't we?
I'm going to pour hydroxychloroquine into your brain jar until you submit.
Will you now?
Patriotic, not patriotic. I'm going to shake you like a snow globe, and you're not going to like it.
It's a nice image, isn't it, ladies and gentlemen?
Do I become your friend when I'm carrying your rather fragile glass bowl jar?
No, I dare you.
Yes, we were talking. So Anne Komneni on the Crusades.
The greatest of Roman emperors, Alexos Komnenos. I'm just sort of wasn't the greatest of the Byzantine. I've seen one or two other people also saying Byzantine, but I'm saying Byzantine. I'm sticking by it.
I know you can be wrong, Britisher. This is a free country.
Wasn't the greatest of the Byzantine emperors Heraclius? Yeah. But I will leave it there. DRT as king will be able to respond in turn, I'm sure. Again, I guess it depends, isn't it? I mean, you've got the chap whose name I can't remember right now, the one who built the Hagia Sophia, Justinian, isn't it? Who under whom they actually reconquered Rome. So for a brief period, Constantinople and Rome were back in the same empire. But Rome by that time was a shadow of her former self. Once the barbarians had taken over for a while, there wasn't much left. Which is always interesting because you always get these people stating that, the Dark Ages, that's a concept that really only applies to Britain. That when the barbarians took over, everything continued much the same. There wasn't really that much of a fall-off. Yes, but by the time the Byzantines got to Rome, there was pretty much nothing left.
I have no idea.
Yes,
my familiarity. I like it's Roman history is one which I need to brush up on, but
the problem with brushing up on Roman history is
there's a lot of it.
It's the sheer scale of it. Yes. It's vast. Particularly if you also include the Byzantines.
I was thinking about, or rather, my recent reading has been on Mesopotamia, and then I also did some on the Russian Revolution. But yes, it's been a long time since and I'm not particularly familiar with the chronology, unfortunately, and the naming of all the emperors and whatnot in the Roman times.
When you say you have read up on Mesopotamia, did you get to the point where Sargon of Akkad invented patriarchy?
He invented it, did he?
I kid you not. Once in a while, I've mentioned this. Sort of on the rare occasions that have been online with Sargon.
And for those of you who don't know, this is weird because we're referring to the historical Sargon as well as himself.
And we've had a bit of a giggle at times because he knows what I mean, and because way back when there was somebody who made a sort of J'accuse video about Sargon of Akkad, in which he claimed Sargon, this is now the modern day person, had chosen that pseudonym because Sargon of Akkad was the one who introduced patriarchy.
And of course, him being the
that was the only
anti-feminist.
reason why he chose that, because he was so anti-feminist that he chose the man who stood for the patriarchy, who had introduced it to start with. And it was just it was just so ridiculous that it was one of those things where you couldn't do anything else but laugh. But it's one of those things that, yes, if you're on with Sargon once in a while, you just nudge him, as in, oh, well, you as the inventor of patriarchy, and he will remember and he will have a bit of a chuckle.
I'm gonna I'll give him a call. Yeah, mate.
I mean, this is quite a while back, but yes, I mean, it isn't often that you will get accused of having chosen your avatar because it invented patriarchy.
Mr. Will Guitar says, given Britishers' obsession with Rome is nearly equal... Sorry?
What obsession?
Your obsession with Rome. I mean, Britisher. Let's face it, if your jar was any more Italian, it would be a fascist.
Well, there you go. Yes, of course.
That's why I made it out of Italian materials. Given British's obsession with Rome is nearly equal to that of his obsession with Magnum P.I., is it right to conclude his favourite comedy is Plebs?
Oh, good God, no. Okay, so first off, we seem to have advanced the lore somewhat. So, given that everything surrounding my brain is Italian, I must therefore be suspended in, what is it? Is it olive oil mixed with white wine from Italy? And my jar must therefore be made of Venetian glass.
Yes,
because of course you obviously know that Venice is famous for glassmaking.
I would know that. Yes,
Of course, yes,
of course.
So I just thought I would add that before I went on to answer these scurrilous accusations by Mr. Will Guitar, who first off suggests that I'm obsessed with the Romans, which, I mean, I see absolutely no evidence for that. Next, he goes on with Magnum P.I.
Yeah, I was going to say I've not come across this particular predilection of yours.
Well, let's put it like this: it is a predilection of Mr. Will Guitar to once in a while suggest that I am obsessed with Magnum P.I., in particular with the opening theme tune.
I can't even remember it off the top of my head. I can remember the opening, the sort of the shot of him driving in the Ferrari, but I don't know what it was. I can't remember the theme music.
Oh, he went to some lengths, sometimes in the chat, sometimes in Twitter, to insist that I was somehow wrapped up in the controversy of a possible remake of Magnum P.I. not featuring the same opening theme tune.
Would it feature the same mustache, though?
Oh, well, I mean, you're the expert on mustaches around here. But when it comes to the finale of that comment, which should cost him a lot more than £5, to be honest, because this is just terrible. Plebs is a god-awful comedy. Anybody who has ever seen that, I mean, the people involved in the making of Plebs should be shot. It was one of those series that I can honestly say was sort of, you could see the death of comedy taking place on screen. It was.
I love that you watched it.
It was shortly before Josh.
Uh-huh.
So this was whilst I was still, bravely trying to kind of watch new British comedy, thinking, well, there must surely be something out there.
Sorry, just for the sake of the audience who may not be aware what Plebs is, it is about a group of 3 desperate young men It is set in Rome, isn't it?
It's set in ancient Rome.
In
yes.
ancient Rome.
So the plebs refers to plebeians.
Yes, the plebeians. They are attempting to find girlfriends, hold down jobs, and decline the social ladder. It's basically a sitcom of sorts.
It's a sitcom of sorts, but you're being generous.
You know, I have found the source of why this series paying to Britisher. It was produced in Bulgaria.
I am not surprised.
Those Bulgarians have been after you ever since you accused Tailed of having a Bulgarian accent.
Yep, yeah, it's their form of revenge. But no, it really is horrible. It's a horrible comedy where, once in a while they go into a bit of gross out humor. I mean, what were those pupils called again? What was that? What was that sitcom with the school kids?
A sitcom with school kids?
Oh Christ! That was a largely sort of gross out humor and a bit of swearing and whatever, but by and large, it fell down on. I can't even think of the name anymore. No doubt someone will remind me, and I'll go, yes, of course. But no, Plebs was just the worst of the bunch. And then, yes, eventually came Josh, and I just said, okay, fine. Now I'm not even trying anymore. After that, I gave up on British sitcoms completely. I'm not willing to try and watch them anymore.
After you forced yourself to sit through 3 seasons of Plebs.
I did. I can assure you I didn't watch 3 seasons worth of Plebs. But you watch a few parts, and at first you watch this and you're sitting there sort of frowning at the screen going, really? And you just try to tell yourself, well, perhaps I'm just not getting it. Perhaps it's this, perhaps it's that. But then eventually you just come to the conclusion, no, it is actually just that bad.
Perhaps the fact that you are a brain in a jar and you don't have eyes, so you listen to everything on audio described, means that you just don't appreciate the majesty of the visual comedy that is Plebs.
Yes, the majesty. That was the word I was looking for throughout this whole
majestic,
thing.
yes.
The majesty.
I will point out I've never watched an episode of Plebs, but I just...
Yes, all I can say, Mr. Will Guitar, is I shall never forgive you.
Moving
on.
Makuta Pterodax says, since March 18th, perhaps even earlier, the real Prime Minister has been Mr. P. Morgan, and the real leader of the opposition has been Mr. P. Hitchens. Is this the right Mr. Morgan that I'm thinking of? Perhaps I've just been ignoring things.
So effectively, the opposition and the Prime Minister consists of Piers Morgan and Peter Hitchens.
Piers, yes. Sorry, for some reason it completely went out of my mind.
Were you stuck with J.P. Morgan in your mind for a moment and wondering, hang on a moment, the man's dead?
Of all things, I was thinking of Peter Morgan, who is a British screenwriter, but that doesn't matter. Yeah, but basically, yeah, he wrote some stuff. Piers Morgan versus Peter Hitchens. I don't know if that's really the case. I don't think that either of them are that popular, to be perfectly honest. I mean, Piers ratings for Piers' show ever since he went full, coronavirus maniac, have dropped through the floor, even though he's boasting that we're getting more viewings than ever before. It's like, yeah, everyone's stuck inside, mate, and they don't know what day it is, and their sleep patterns are completely ruined. Of course you're getting more viewings than before, but nobody appears to enjoy your show. And Peter Hitchens has always been... Like, I've never felt that Peter Hitchens, for all his musings, has ever been really the voice of the silent majority. Do you know what I mean?
Well, he's not really vox populi, no.
No, not even like a minority kind of... Like, because he's cast here as the leader of the opposition.
The rest of the population is not that bitter.
No, but he's not even that bitter. He just sees himself as... He's not that bitter in person. He just sees himself as charting the demise of society, and he's just resigned himself to that fact. He's just a very pessimistic man. But I don't think he's bitter. He's very adamant that he appreciates all the technological and innovative comforts that the advancement of time has brought him. But he remembers the suffering of his youth, or the suffering he saw in his youth as well. So I don't think he's bitter in a nostalgic sense, but maybe just a bitter personality in general. But I don't know whether or not he's the voice of the opposition in this country. I mean, I still feel like...
Well, if you see it through the lens of pro-lockdown and against lockdown.
Yes, I suppose. Although I would say that Piers appears a lot more rabid than our government does at this point. So hardly established.
Well, I've always said about the government that they seem actually to be fairly reluctant.
Yes.
They've never struck me as really, really wanting this and finally having found their excuse. It seemed more a matter of, yeah, we'll just have to do this now, won't we?
And that seems to have been, I mean, that's the theme throughout. It's one of the reasons why I'm, for all the people shouting police state, I'm not that concerned with the Conservatives holding back. I'm more concerned with the police attempting to retain powers than I am with the government wanting to do so. I don't think Boris or his cabinet is extreme enough to want to hold on to those particular powers longer than necessary, given that, as the left is so keen to point out, there are slaves to the economy. And I think even they recognise that...
well, actually, those sort of accusations from the left help the Tories a great deal.
They do, yes. But I mean, I think that that mindset of theirs is one where they realise that having an 80% wage welfare pot is only going to do them a great deal of harm in the long run, and it's a smart decision to relinquish these things. Although, again, as with all things, I wish that sunset clauses were put in place before the legislation was passed, if you know what I mean. So once the government has declared X statement, the coronavirus pandemic has ended, for instance, then, or tie it to another body even, say, once the World Health Organization says that there's no pandemic in Britain anymore, then, that these powers are now null and void. We can't do anything with them. I think that's...
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned the World Health Organization, because they have now finally conceded that the wet market in Wuhan might have been related to the coronavirus outbreak.
Oh, might it? Oh, how stunning. How brave the World Health Organization.
I mentioned it in the week that was yesterday, that the World Health Organization has suddenly come round to thinking about that. And the Chinese have suddenly decided that they might wish to reform their entire disease prevention system.
Right.
So it seems as if, with the West having suddenly started to pile on the pressure, I mean, let's face it, the World Health Organization seems to be a Chinese organ at the moment. They seem to be in their pocket. I think
that's the phrase I would use.
Fair to say it doesn't strike you as something extremely partisan or outrageous to say. But those two basically came out with those statements, and that was. So basically, you had various countries, including the EU, and I think Australia was pretty much leading the way in saying we want an international inquiry.
Yes.
Not run by the World Health Organization, thank you very much, into what happened here.
Yes. And otherwise, we might end up with surprise result as organization investigating itself finds that there is no fault.
The Chinese immediately said that this was an attack on them, and you go, well, why is that an attack on you? If
no. What you should have said is,
why is that an attack?
You say, yes, it is an attack on you. We want to find out what goes on, and we don't think you're transparent enough. Thank you very much.
There seems to be pressure being brought to bear. So the US, what is it? The Department of Homeland Security. They put out a report. Now, again, these are not really substantiated reports, and this may well be US propaganda. And if you look at the dates, there are a few, question marks. Some of the narrative is possible, but nonetheless, you sort of wonder.
The US putting out propaganda, Britisher? Would you
the
believe
US
it?
put out a report in which they said they had kind of looked into it, and their view is that the imports into China of such things such as PPE, medical equipment, went up, and
substantially, yes,
and the export decreased. So, to their mind, whilst China was still basically quibbling about whether this was a problem, they were building up their stock of medical equipment with which to deal with it.
Yes, they delayed it so that they could have a hegemony on.
So it's pressure being brought to bear like that. So basically, we want an inquiry. Hang on a moment. Were you actually up to no good while you were denying that something was going on? Suddenly, the Chinese, who I think have somewhere the penny has dropped in Peking, that the propaganda isn't working. That it's only working to a certain extent, so that certain things that they are kind of pre-chewing are being taken up in the West, like calling it a Chinese virus is racist, because like that you've got something to beat the Republicans over the head with. That is being adopted, but nonetheless, most of the kind of narrative of it had nothing to do with us. In fact, there's not even any evidence that it started in China. Nobody is believing that.
No, thank God.
And I think they are kind of realizing that, look, we have to put something out. We have to show that we have to try some sort of damage limitation, because this kind of wave of propaganda which we've put out, the earlier propaganda has completely backfired on us, and the sort of more recent propaganda, where the Chinese ambassador to Britain was on television, sometimes shouting over the BBC interviewer as he was trying to move him along. Things like that just haven't worked out well. So, how do we now handle this? So, there seems to me a sort of an approach of, hang on, we have to give a bit of ground, and then retrench again, and then sort of try and dig in and perhaps do another propaganda wave. But at first, we kind of need to be seen to be giving way a bit in an attempt to kind of compromise and get rid of these ideas that we need an inquiry or something like that. So if you are already saying that, we're reforming our healthcare system now, you're kind of trying to preempt things by saying, okay, look, we concede that there were some problems here. Not that we're to blame, of course, but we concede that there were some problems here. But there's no point in looking into it now because we're already putting in the reforms anyway. So that's what I think seems to be happening here.
The history will be written after the fact. That is what generally the gist is, and there will be no record from the present time. It will be determined by the CCP. Yes. The Harry Channel says, not to diminish here impact, not sure if that's a typo or not, but I'll bet they are teaching kids now that Empress Theodora was Justinian's Dolly Madison and the real power behind the throne.
Well, I've heard that Empress Theodora might have been the real power behind the throne, but it's one of those things where, it's quite a long way away, and to now try and revise these things is actually fairly difficult, isn't it? It's not as if you could go and ask anybody.
Yeah, I mean, you could, Britisher, but you're just...
yes, of course.
You're an
Yes,
insufferable arse, so we know that you won't do it. I don't know where that particular slice of vindictiveness came from. Like, there shall be no wit. There shall
Something tells me that someone is going to clip that.
I'm sorry, man.
Well, as I already said to Mr. Will Guitar, I shall never forgive you.
Well, we're getting to him.
I'm deeply wounded.
Odif Yitsape, which is beastly Fido backwards, don't think I haven't noticed, donated 1,000 rubles. Thank you ever so much, that's very appreciated. DRT is King says, Alexos is the start of the Komneni Renaissance, who were able to reverse the bad turn at Manzikirk until your beloved Italians sacked Constantinople. Response, Britisher.
Well, yes, I think it was one of the Komneni who kind of had to hop it when the place was sacked. It clearly wasn't one of the greatest turns in Christendom for a crusade to sack the largest city in Christendom. But that was the Venetians. And I think the Venetians have always had a pretty sort of low opinion of themselves because they kind of realize that at the source of their history lies this kind of ultimate opportunism. Let's hijack a crusade and then,
it's a good first date idea.
Sabotage the main Mediterranean trading power and then pick up the pieces. And lo and behold, Venice became the main European trading power. So yes, they didn't cover themselves in glory, the Venetians.
I see, but did they get the girl?
Yes, they got the girl, they got the money, they got the statuary, they got everything. There are 4 bronze horses in Venice that came from Constantinople. So fantastic bronze statuary, which, for a huge length of time, no one would be able to replicate.
Yeah.
And for some reason, it stands in the city of Venice, and, well, I wonder how it got there. Well, yes, they sacked Constantinople.
Speaking of Venice, it's interesting that the canals in Venice were running clear for the first time in I don't know how many years it's been since they were unpolluted by all the detritus of both tourism and their own inhabitants.
Well, I'm not even sure it's the detritus of their inhabitants. I just think it's the fact that the constant traffic on the water will be churning up the silt on the shallow seabed. I
see. Yes.
I mean, even something like the gondolieres will more than likely be churning up the water. Albeit, no doubt, if you've got a motorboat with a propeller, you will make a much better fist of it. And I think that's what's happening. That the water is constantly being churned up, mixing with the silt on the bottom, and therefore you get brown water. The moment nobody does that anymore, the silt sinks to the bottom, and you have clear water. So I don't think it's necessarily rubbish and detritus. I think it's just activity which causes it.
Have you visited Venice?
No.
It's not just silt. Let me put it that way. It's a remarkably fragrant city.
Well, I had a conversation with Rubber about that very thing. Online, actually. We talked about it once, because I had not been to Venice, he had been to Venice, and I asked him about that very thing. And because I had heard what I think you have heard, as in, well, I mean, surely, if the droppings go into the lagoon, then you would expect it to smell a certain way. And he assured me that wasn't the case. That you get a smell of the sea, that you would get at any port, but you don't get the scent of fecal matter at all. So this seemed to be a false impression that I had, and I'm assuming you are sharing that with me.
No, it's not the rivers, the canals themselves. I think as much as the general hygiene standards of the Italians when it comes to getting rid of their rubbish in their quite claustrophobic cities, as it were.
I mean, my concern was always that if you have a house that is on stilts and you go to the toilet, where does it go?
Down the side of the stilts.
So if you do that for a few decades and then a few centuries and whatever, what does the place smell like? So that's what I had heard. So I kind of put that to him, and he said, "Well, no, it's just not the case. He was there, and it didn't. So there wasn't really a Venetian pong. So all I can do is pass on what he said. But yeah, because I mean I've not been there, so I would kind of have to take his word for it."
Well, I shall ask the opinions of those who have travelled to Venice in the chat to give their opinion on the smell of the city. Mr. Will Guitar says, I am sensing that the Britisher has mixed feelings on the show, plebs. Call it a hunch. Was Cremona part of Rome, by the way? Some great instruments there.
Sorry, it was what part of Rome?
Cremona? Cremona.
Cremona. Is that where the circus is?
It's...
Or am I I'm mistaken that with some other place?
I mean,
I'm just wondering whether Cremona is where the circus... I'm just completely and utterly butchering that now in an attempt to actually type it in, and Google doesn't know what on earth I'm talking about.
I mean, I've not been to Cremona.
No, I think I'm mistaken. I'm talking of a different. Yeah, I mean, Cremona is in Italy. It will have been part of Italian, Roman Italy. At the moment, I don't know where he's going.
In terms of it being a part of Rome itself, I don't know. But there we are. If we've missed a joke somewhere, please feel free to clarify. You don't need to send in another super chat. Just drop us a message in the chat. Mighty Balzac says, a 20-year-old Britisher wasn't bald, and his head didn't glimmer. Do you catch the reference, Britisher?
And he will never need a Zimmer.
Never need a Zimmer, indeed. Yes.
And he will never be mistaken for Yul Brynner.
No, but then no one ever is these days, shall we say. I know, yes. I'm basically, there's not actually been that much news this week. But we can go back to...
It's hard to generate news when everybody's sitting at home.
Indeed. Wasn't there one day which was famous in history where they just said there was no news? The day where there was no news?
Wouldn't that be lovely? Sort of one day, CNN. Today there is no news. Donald Trump has done nothing wrong.
Yes. No, it was because... I don't know whether... April 18th, 1930, a typhoon swept through Leyte in the Philippines, causing extensive damage. The BBC radio news bulletin stated, Good evening. Today is Good Friday. There is no news. Piano music followed. That's it. That was the extent of that.
I like the piano music bit.
Yes. But yes, the lack of local, presumably news and also information from various regions. Now that back in the days when we didn't have a global news network, yes, there is no news, and they played piano music. In a similar way, this is Fake Accents Unite. We are out of news, but I don't have any piano music to play you.
But I mean, we started on films, didn't we? And there was the promise that we would be returning to films
Oh yes,
as we swerved into talking about more
fair enough.
newsy things. Yes.
Indeed, fair. No, I was curious about your opinion on canned laughter in productions.
I'm all for it.
That's not the extent. That's the extent of your
I'm all
opinion.
for it. I think. I mean, most canned laughter is not really canned laughter. I mean, there is, there are some like sort of sketch shows and whatever that had canned laughter in them. But many of the sitcoms that kind of used canned laughter actually use real audiences watching them.
Mm.
But they may switch the laughs.
Yes.
So, if you've if a particular joke was done once and the audience gave a good response and laughed, but somebody then screwed up a subsequent line and the whole thing needed to be shot again, then obviously the next time round the audience isn't going to laugh quite as vibrantly because they've already heard it once.
Yes.
So there was that, and there was also, what did they call it, sweetening, whereby the famous laugh machine that they had, they would kind of add via that machine to the existing laugh if they thought that it needed a bit more oomph.
Mm.
But that's really more sort of the technique of it. As such, the idea of having laughter in sitcoms and in sketch shows and whatever, I'm all for it. I think it's much more natural rather than just having dead air after somebody tells a joke.
Yeah, the dead air. I'm curious. I feel like it's grown. The concept of it grew out of presumably theatre, but the there are some shows for which they are designed to have segments of dead air where people are supposed to laugh, right? Notable examples in British television being things like Blackadder and Red Dwarf, etc. And I've tried to watch things like I don't know whether or not it's just that Red Dwarf's pacing or something. Like, I can't watch Red Dwarf without the laughter track. I enjoy the show. I find it amusing. I don't think it's laugh out loud funny, perhaps, but it is entertaining. And part of the entertainment apparently is the laugh track, because the 2 episodes that are on Netflix sans laugh track I cannot stand to watch.
Well, it just shows that
those.
laughter is something communal,
Mm.
and therefore, our laughing together, even if you're sitting alone in a room, somehow works better. What, of course, I think has brought about the fad for not having a laugh track, aside from the supposed forced sophistication of, oh, I don't need to be told when to laugh, I'm much cleverer than other audiences. Aside from that, it's the type of comedy that is in the ascendancy. So what has come about is that rather than the sort of more traditional comedy, you've got the comedy of cringe, the comedy of embarrassment. The
comedy of Britain.
well, no, I'm sort of thinking The Office. I'm thinking Alan Partridge. Where it's a sort of painful embarrassment of that particular character. So if then, rather than having an audience react with ha 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 ha, if you then have this painful silence, that is, I think, where some of this came from. But by and large, yes, I think it creates a much better rhythm to the show to have the laughter in there. I think audiences, by and large, feel more comfortable with it, and there must be some wisdom in what was being done, given that all the comedy greats used it. The idea that now suddenly Ricky Gervais is better than Ronnie Barker and co. and that therefore
Why do I
we
get a
can
sense
abandon
of
this.
bitterness from you there, Britisher?
Well, I just find that there seems to be an element of patronizing, of being patronizing towards the past. As in, oh well, those were all the silly non-sophisticates who needed prompting, or who needed to prompt their audience. And you look at it and you just go, hang on a moment, look what sort of names that includes. Then look what names it includes in the more present day of people in the last 10, 20 years who haven't had laughter in it. And you can't help but feel that in itself would favour the laughter track.
I'm thinking, like, the only person that I've never understood his appeal. For goodness sake, what was his name? One of the most famous sort of TV magician type characters, met the Queen, did the Royal Variety performance, died on stage. Everyone thought it was a joke, but he actually died. Tommy, no. What's
not Tommy Cooper?
Yes, Tommy Cooper.
Okay.
Are you just going to tell me that I'm
not quite sure where you're going?
No, I'm going with, like, I've never understood the appeal, like, in terms of the comedy of the thing. When you're talking about people not bashing, classic.
Oh, you've never understood Tommy Cooper?
No, not. I mean, you can understand. As in, I've never been amused by it.
So the bottle trick, where he's doing the bottles. That's his most famous sketch, isn't it?
Yes.
Where he does the magic trick with the bottles.
Yes.
And it's just getting more and more ridiculous, and it's pretty bleedingly obvious how he's doing the trick, but nobody cares because it's just funny to watch.
So you claim.
Well, have you seen The Plank? Because there was 2 versions of that, wasn't there? And one of them had Tommy Cooper in it.
No, I haven't seen that.
Yeah, I think it was Eric Sykes and Tommy Cooper, I'm not sure. And then later it was redone with Arthur Lowe. One, I think, was done for television. I think the other one was originally sort of a cinema short of sorts. There is great humour in there. It doesn't necessarily mean every single comedian of the past needs to be your flavour.
No, but I mean, I've never laughed at anything he's ever done. so it's kind of, it's very strange. But perhaps that's just.
Well, you're just wrong.
Well, of course, Britisher, because one can be wrong about comedy, can't they? That's the way it works.
Well, no,
I can recognise that it is.
To get back to the laughter track, I don't think people were laughing at Tommy Cooper because of the laughter track.
No.
And that had the laughter track not been there, everybody would have suddenly realised that that he's just not funny. I mean, what was the goggle-eyed guy called? He did some sketches I remember with Spike Milligan and whatever. Wasn't he also in Beau Geste with Michael York?
Goggle-eyed.
And he played Igor in Young Frankenstein.
Again, I'm sorry, man. You've lost me here with this guy.
Let's see, cast Young Frankenstein. Marty Feldman, of course. As I say, sketches with Marty Feldman and Spike Milligan, and they've got laughter track in it, and you just go, okay. I think we're looking at comedy royalty here. You look at Monty Python. Nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition, and there is laughter there. It might seem odd if they burst into the room and said nobody ever expects the Spanish Inquisition, and then just this followed by utter silence.
Very true, very true. Many people confirming, yes, you're thinking Marty Feldman. I'm just gonna whiz through the last couple of things. Unfortunately, it is getting late in the eve. I must get away. But basically, Aaron Telford says The Wrath of Khan is the best Star Trek movie. Do you agree, Britisher?
There's no doubt.
Exactly. What is this? We may as well rename the show to Popular Opinion at this rate.
There's absolutely no doubt. The Wrath of Khan is by far and away the best Star Trek movie. Anybody who thinks otherwise just doesn't know their
British. Just say what you want to say. They should be taken out in front of their families and shot.
Yes. Yeah. No. I could live with that. Yes.
Hikari Manakaniko says, Rome and Florence get quite fragrant in the summer, yes. As I noted on my travels there a couple of years ago.
I say I have only been to Rome once, and I didn't notice any fragrance.
I mean, clearly...
that you would be hinting at, if you
Britisher,
know what I mean.
You being put up on Palatine Hill in the finest of Roman accommodation.
Yes, yeah, the only 8-star hotel in the
known
Western
world.
Hemisphere.
Yes, dressed in head to toe in your purple sort of silken
with topless
robes.
page 3 girls feeding me single grapes one at a time.
Yeah, slowly dropping them through the opening in your brain jar. It is truly a sight to behold, ladies and gentlemen. If you've never seen the Britisher being fed by nubile women grapes through his jar hole, I suppose we call it. On that delightful note, it is time to end. But I'd like to thank everyone in the audience for turning up to this episode. And thank you to everyone who donated, and thank you, of course, to the Britisher for providing such delightful conversation for another evening.
Mr. Will Guitar, I'm watching you.
Take care, everybody, and good night.
Toodle pip.